With their proud tradition of errantry wars, Bretonia might be the most traveled nation of men in the Warhammer world. From the parched deserts of Araby to the frozen hellscape of Norska, the kingdom's noble knights have fought with righteous zeal to eradicate the foul and profane worldwide. Even in lands where the armies of the king have never fought, Bretonnian questing knights can be found seeking the favor of the lady by performing mighty and valiant deeds. The far-flung nature of these quests have ensured that there are few people in the old world who don't have at least a passing familiarity with Bretonia and its people, even if that familiarity is tainted by stereotypes. In this video, we'll be exploring how Bretonia views the other human cultures of the Warhammer world, and how these people view Bretonia in turn. Of all the other nations of men, Bretonia probably has the best relationship with the Border Princes. Many Border Princes are descended from Bretonnian knights that crossed the vaults in an errantry war of one kind or another. Indeed, the Border Princes were first founded when Baron Tybalt led a crusading army against the Arabian forces of Sultan Jafar in 1452 IC. His force took the long, overland route to Araby, intending to cross through the Badlands before reaching the Desert Kingdom. While they were traveling, other Bretonnian and Empire knights sailed to Araby and broke the Sultan's forces. Upon hearing that they were too late, Tybalt and his men did not abandon their pursuit of glory. Instead, they changed their course and brought battle to the Greenskins at the crossing of Blood River. It was a massive victory for the Bretonnian forces, with innumerable orcs and goblins pierced by holy lances or crushed by charging steeds. Afterwards, many of these knights stayed behind and built great castles to protect against the Greenskin menace, becoming the first Border Princes. More recently, the Border Princes have received a new influx of Bretonnian knights. A horde of orcs and goblins were heavily pressuring the Border Princes over 100 years ago, and it seemed likely that they would succumb to the Green Tide despite their stubborn resilience. In response, King Charles declared an errantry war against the Greenskins to relieve their distant relatives. Running from 2420 IC to 2488 IC, the longest errantry war to date, entire generations of Bretonnian nobles would ride into the east and battle the Greenskins. Just like the knights who initially founded the Border Princes, many of these warriors settled in the region after the war was over. These Border Princes are not disgraced by any means, and many still view themselves as loyal subjects of the crown. Indeed, quite a few still owe bonds of fealty to nobles back home, though these are purely nominal at this point. These princes view themselves as spreading the virtues of honor and nobility to less enlightened lands, an attitude that has set them at odds with non-Bretonnian Border Princes. As such, Bretonnians are generally unpopular in realms that aren't ruled by the descendants of a Bretonnian knight. Now we must turn our attention to the south. Bretonia's relationship with Estalians depends on which of the two major Estalian kingdoms you're referring to. Bilbali, located on Bretonia's southern border, is separated from the Duchy of Carcassonne by a single river. Trade flows freely between the two realms, and their nobles are prone to intermarriage. As a result, Bretonia and Bilbali get along very well, despite the latter's small size and odd fighting styles. The land of Magrita, however, is considered a kingdom of peasants. This is mostly due to the bad blood between Bilbali and Magrita, which taints Bretonia's opinion of the more southerly realm. Still, the Ladies' Knights liberated both kingdoms from the Sultan Jafar's forces, and such deeds are not easily forgotten even 1,000 years later. Bretonia's relationship with the Empire is decidedly rockier than its relationship with the Border Princes, or Estalia. The two realms are like siblings, engaging in border skirmishes and small battles without ever erupting into full-fledged war. Their problems run deep, with the roots stretching back to the foundation of the Empire. Ever since the Bretonnian tribes refused to answer Sigmar's call for unity, there's been distrust between the two nations. The Empire looks down on Bretonia for its relative youth and pompous nature. Bretonia, for its part, views the Empire's lack of nobility with disdain. Their underhanded tricks and love of firearms are an affront to the noble virtues so loudly proclaimed by the ladies' servants. In addition to their philosophical differences, there are material reasons that the Empire and Bretonia don't get along. Their close borders spark tension, and Bretonian expansion is always a concern for imperial strategists. This fear is spread to the general populace as well, with unfortunate side effects. Occasional pogroms will sweep across the Empire, targeting Bretonnian immigrants whenever the threat of war looms between the two nations. That's not to say it's all bad, however. Both the Empire and Bretonia are staunch enemies of Greenskins, undead, and the forces of chaos. When these threats rear their heads, the nations of men will set aside their differences and fight as one. Currently, with chaos ravaging Kislev and the northern provinces of the Empire, relations have never been better. More Bretonnian knights ride north every day, hoping to earn the lady's favor while fighting alongside the Empire's state troopers and knightly orders. Karl Franz is immensely grateful for this aid, for in these dark times, every sword arm is needed. If Bretonia's opinion of the Empire is mixed, its view of Tilea is downright hostile. Bretonnians see Tileans as either thieves pretending to be merchants, or murderers pretending to be warriors. Tilea's tradition of mercenary work is seen as deeply ignoble among the ladies' champions, and they never, officially, hire them. Additionally, merchants are seen as more loathsome than the meanest peasants, and are treated poorly as a result. Tileans, for their part, view Bretonia as a land of stupid nobles, bragging about their father's achievements, and oppressed peasants that barely count as human. Many won't even travel to Bretonia, instead letting Bretonnians travel to Tilea for their luxury goods and mercenary contracts. Fortunately, these differences rarely lead to actual conflict, as the distance between Bretonia and Tilea is great enough that most dukes can't be bothered mustering an army against them. Bretonia has been engaged in a game of cat and mouse with the Wasteland ever since it declared its independence from the Empire in 2429 IC. The Bretonnians would love to incorporate the Wasteland into their domain without upsetting the Empire, which is a task easier said than done. The Empire, for its part, would like to recapture its old territories, and any Bretonnian moves on it would be seen as an act of war. That hasn't stopped some ambitious nobles from plotting against the Wasteland, however. Adalbert, Marquis of Coron, dreams of the day he can conquer Marienburg and its hinterlands. The Marquis hopes that this would give him the requisite prestige and wealth required to petition the king for ducal status, establishing the first new dukedom since Bretonia's foundation. The Wasteland knows of Bretonia's territorial ambitions, and augments his armies with Tilean mercenaries for extra security whenever the dukes come sniffing around. This has not improved Bretonian and Tilean relations. Bretonia's relations with Kislev, Grand Cathay, and Nippon aren't recorded in the primary sources. Perhaps these realms are just too far away, and Bretonia hasn't formed a definitive opinion on them because of that. It is a little surprising that Kislev and Bretonia aren't more friendly, though. Both are dedicated enemies of chaos, which would presumably give them common cause. Perhaps the stoic warriors of the north simply can't tell the Knights of the Lady apart from the soldiers of the Empire, as all southerners are cut from the same weak cloth. Bretonnians, for their part, would undoubtedly not appreciate being called weak or compared to the unchivalrous forces of the Empire. While most of the nations already mentioned here have had both positive and negative dealings with Bretonia in the past, some nations of men have had only hostile interactions with the knightly realm. Araby and Bretonia's relationship, for instance, has always been defined by conflict. When the Sultan Jafar invaded Estalia, it was mostly Bretonian knights that cast his armies back to their desert homeland. They then pursued the Arabian armies to El-Hayik and slew the demon and summoning sultan there. This has tainted Bretonian opinions of Araby for millennia to come. While they don't appear to have fought since then, the age-old hostilities remain. Bretonians still view Araby as an inhospitable desert full of demon worshippers and exotic spices, but it does rank relatively low on the list of threats compared to the Green Tide or Menace of Chaos, so long as it doesn't expand north once more. Speaking of chaos, Bretonia has an entirely hostile relationship with Norskins. Norskin marauders will sail across the Sea of Claws to raid Bretonian settlements, while the occasional Bretonian crusade will sail north to punish the Chaos Worshippers. While the merchants of Marienburg and Ehrengard may trade with Norskins during time of peace, the Knights of the Lady forbid them from setting foot upon Bretonian soil. This is quite frankly a sensible move, and one that should be mirrored by the men of the Empire, the Wasteland, and Kislev. There is no method of trade that makes willingly accepting a servant of the Dark Gods into your city worthwhile. With that, we have finished our video covering Bretonia's diplomatic relations with the other humans of the Warhammer world. As you can see, most of them are not great. Bretonia's arrogance and martial culture has put it into conflict with most of their fellow human nations at one point or another, and these have soured feelings for centuries at a time. Still, despite all their failings, Bretonia has proven itself to be a bastion of order on the world stage, and a stout friend to their fellow men when chaos grows in strength. This video is just the first half of the story, however. In the next video, to be released whenever I feel like it, we will discuss how the Elder races view the Knights of Bretonia. Dwarfs and Elves, Greenskins and Beastmen, all have strong feelings on Bretonia's existence, and they will be covered in due time. That's all I have for today though, so until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.